I worked for NASA for about 42 years. Actually, for 42 years, almost exactly. So if you are a science fiction buff and you read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42 is the answer, right? So that's a little science fiction lore. But during that time period, as a scientist, I managed missions. I was involved in, 24 missions. And the last set of missions, the very last mission I was involved in, it is being built. It's called Clipper, and it's going to Europa. But the last one that flew was DART. And DART is our planetary defense mission that went and hit an asteroid and moved it. Okay? Now, we know the dinosaurs didn't have a space program. Does everyone know dinosaurs didn't have a space program? And they died 65 million years ago after a 6-kilometer asteroid hit this planet and created an enormous death all around the Yucatan, Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, all that whole area was pretty well wiped out with life. But also, the material went so high in the atmosphere, actually went higher than what space station is, which is like 425 kilometers. And then the Earth pulled the material down and then created this pulverized layer of dirt that circled the planet, stopped plants from growing, killed the food cycle, and 85% of the species on this planet was eradicated in the one event. And it took about 50 years for that material to filter through the atmosphere and for the Earth to come back to life. So about 18 or so years ago, we started looking for near-Earth objects, recognizing that they're out there, and we recognize there's about 60,000 that cross our orbit and that are going to hit this planet. And it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. And not all of them are huge. There's about 1,000 of them that are real planet killers. And there's 20,000 that are city killers and regional destruction. And so we know we're going to have to defend this planet, and we put a program in place to do that, and that was with a mission to hit an asteroid and move it out of the way. Now, it wasn't an asteroid that was in danger of hitting us, but it was one of those things that we had to do to practice to make sure we could do that. So that was the very last mission I worked on before that is flying before I left NASA. But I worked on more than 24 missions, which includes the rovers on Mars, like Curiosity and Perseverance, the helicopter that's flying called Ingenuity. I worked on Cassini, which orbited Saturn, and we finally decided we couldn't leave it orbiting Saturn. It might hit one of those moons that may harbor life, so we had to ditch Cassini into Saturn, which we did. And Juno, which is orbiting Jupiter, and New Horizons, which flew by Pluto, and Messenger, which orbited Mercury, and Dawn, which went from one asteroid to another, and the really big ones, huge asteroids that are far enough away that aren't in danger of hitting us, thank goodness, because they're just enormous. 6 kilometers destroyed 85% of the life. Well, we're talking about asteroids that are 1,000 kilometers. Okay, that's Vesta. And 500 kilometers, that series is the 1,500 kilometers is Vesta. So those are just huge, but they'll never make it. They'll never come close to us, so that's good. So in all those missions, we did some fantastic things and learned an enormous amount about the environment of the solar system. One of the missions that I helped fund, although I wasn't extremely involved in it, was Kepler. I helped fund Kepler, and Kepler is the one that goes out and finds planets that orbit other stars. And it has found thousands of them. And we now know there are more planets in our galaxy than there are stars. You know, those are the kind of things that I have learned in my lifetime. So if you get excited about planetary science, to know what's happening, and astrophysics, things like dark energy and dark matter. We didn't know about dark matter, for instance, when I started my career. We didn't know much about dark energy, but we definitely had no idea there's dark matter out there and what that does. Dark matter is something we don't know what it is, but it only operates by moving things. It has gravity. Gravity is what it interacts with. We, and everything that we know, interact with light. Now, gravity affects us, but really, it's all about light. I see Nado from the light that he reflects to me, my eyes, matter that we are very familiar with interacts with light. But dark matter does not do that. It only interacts with gravity. So it's just a brand new concept, and that's come up since my lifetime. So the science we do is just absolutely exploding. What I also like to do in my career was disruptive technologies. And disruptive technologies started out when I went to my first job at Marshall Space Flight Center in 1980. And I was allowed to create NASA's first internet. And I look in the audience and I see some people lived at a time when there was no internet, and some of the fantastic things that we have today, like cell phones and electric cars and many of these other items. In fact, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to go to the wall and call them on a phone that was connected to the wall, okay? Or send them a letter, or send them what we call a fax, which now is also almost eradicated from our use. And so the internet, was something I started for NASA in 1980. I connected in 1985 the European Space Agency and all the universities there, in addition to the universities that we were working with in the United States. And in 1987, we went to Japan. In 1992, we were in Russia. So in the 80s and the 90s, early 90s, all the big four space agencies were connected. And then we migrated that internet to the internet we know today. So these disruptive technologies are incredibly important. And that included the World Wide Web. So when that came out in the early 90s, NASA was also one of the first to take advantage of that. And some of the NASA web pages, in fact, some that I was involved in, were the 200th web page on the internet. 200th web page. It's very, very early. So tonight, we're going to talk about another disruptive technology, an incredible technology that I am really excited about, and it's called the Metaverse. It's called the Metaverse. So let's see. I was just wasting a little time so that everyone comes in, but I think we're probably right at the starting period. So let me go ahead and you're very welcome. You have announcements, please do so.
Acho que agora foi. Boa noite a todos. muito obrigada pela presença de vocês aqui nessa noite. Essa é mais uma sessão de apresentação dos Team Projects que estão sendo conduzidos pelos alunos do SSP 23, Space Studies Program 23, que está acontecendo aqui em São José dos Campos. Então, muitos de vocês estão aqui é porque conhecem, né? Já ouviram falar do que é o programa. Então, é um programa que começou em 25 de junho, né? E vai até o final de agosto, 26 de junho até 25 de agosto. Então, os alunos estão agora na última fase, né? São 3 etapas. A primeira fase é a fase de Core Lectures. A segunda, eles entram na fase de departamentos. E agora, eles estão nos Team Projects, que estão trabalhando 4 temas. Né? Na semana passada, na quinta-feira passada, nós tivemos aqui uma discussão sobre 2 dos 3 temas que foram propostos pelo Brasil. Water Security e Smart Cities, no contexto das grandes cidades da América Latina. Então, os chairs desse departamento, desses 2 TPs, vieram até aqui, apresentaram o que é o escopo de trabalho de cada Team Project, discutiram com as pessoas que estavam na plateia, foram muitas perguntas interessantes, muitos insights que foram debatidos, e hoje é a apresentação de mais um desses Team Projects, né? Como o Jim bem já introduziu para vocês, ele hoje vai falar sobre o metaverso e o seu papel no futuro do espaço. Mas esse é um papel que não está contido apenas ao espaço, é o futuro, como o Jim bem colocou, é uma tecnologia disruptiva. Nós temos aqui educadores, né? Então o papel do metaverso na educação e em tantas outras frentes. Né? A minha filha quer fazer arquitetura, eu estava conversando com ela que no futuro, quem sabe, ela vai vender projeto colocando para os clientes, né, a possibilidade de experimentar aquele ambiente que está sendo projetado. Enfim, o limite é o céu. Então, para esse tema, né, esse Team Project está sendo desenvolvido, né, com apoio de 3 chairs. O Jim Green é um dos chairs. Temos também o Jacob Cohen e a Maria Cecília. Então, eu vou apresentar para vocês a biografia deles. O Jim Green trabalhou na NASA por 42 anos antes de se aposentar em dezembro de 2022. Ele tem PhD em Física e começou a trabalhar no Marshall Space Flight Center como cientista. Jim desenvolveu e gerenciou a rede de análise de física espacial e foi um mergulhador de segurança no tanque da flutuação neutra, fazendo mais de 150 mergulhos até 1985. Jim foi para o Goddard Space Flight Center, onde ocupou vários cargos de gerenciamento no Diretório de Ciências Espaciais. Foi co-investigador e vice-cientista do projeto de missão Imager for Magnetopause to Aurora Global Exploration, o IMAGE. De 1992 a 2000, ele também foi vice-cientista do projeto para operações de missão e análise de dados para as missões científicas geoespaciais globais, WIND e Polar. De 2006 a 2018, Jim foi o diretor da divisão de ciência planetária na sede da NASA, tornando-se o diretor mais antigo da divisão, com a responsabilidade programática geral pelo sobrevoo da espaçonave New Horizons em Plutão, a espaçonave Juno em Júpiter e o pouso do rover Curiosity em Marte, só para citar alguns. De 2018 a 2022, ele se tornou cientista-chefe da NASA. Escreveu mais de 125 artigos científicos em revistas especializadas e mais de 80 artigos técnicos e populares. Em 2017, o asteroide 25913 foi renomeado como James Green em sua homenagem. Em 2015, o Dr. Green coordenou o envolvimento da NASA com o filme The Martian, que nós tivemos a oportunidade de acompanhar no sábado passado, no Vicentina Aranha. Eu peço, por favor, uma salva de palmas para o nosso Jim Green. Esse Team Project também conta com o apoio, né, com a orientação do Dr. Jacob Cohen, que está ali em pé do nosso lado. Ele é atualmente o cientista-chefe do NASA Ames Research Center. Nessa condição, ele fornece consultoria e supervisão para programas de pesquisa e atua como principal consultor do Centro na administração de programas de pesquisa de longo prazo, de alto risco e criativos e inventivos. Como parte de seu interesse na utilização do espaço e da aeronáutica para avanços científicos, Jacob facilita e desenvolve colaborações internacionais, interagências acadêmicas e comerciais para sustentar novas iniciativas de pesquisa. O Dr. Cohen lidera a série atual de verão da NASA, que consiste em palestras de líderes globais sobre tópicos relevantes para os objetivos da NASA. Além de ser cientista-chefe, é vice-diretor de integridade de pesquisa da NASA, diretor de integridade de pesquisa do Centro de Pesquisa Ames da NASA e membro do Conselho Acadêmico do Corpo Docente Global da ISU. Os interesses pessoais de pesquisa do Jacob incluem evolução, virologia, biologia espacial, astrobiologia e pequenos satélites e desenvolvimento de tecnologia para o avanço biológico e a busca por pesquisas sobre a vida. Dr. Cohen recebeu seu doutorado da Universidade de Nova York na área de evolução molecular. Completou uma bolsa de pós-doc nos laboratórios de pesquisa em oftalmologia do Cedar Sinai Medical Center na área de relações com hospedeiros virais. Ocupou vários cargos de pesquisa e gerenciamento na indústria, academia e governo. Por favor, também uma salva de palmas para o Dr. Jacob Cohen. Por fim, também a professora Maria Cecília, da Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, acompanha e orienta o desenvolvimento desse Team Project. Maria Cecília é professora de Engenharia Aeroespacial no Brasil há 12 anos. É física com mestrado e doutorado em Tecnologia e Engenharia Espacial pelo INPE. Ensina alunos de graduação no Brasil, na UFMG, e é uma professora apaixonada e apaixonante. Desenvolve estudos na área de dinâmica e controle de atitude de naves espaciais, né? Tradução pelo Google da NIS. E também é interessada em engenharia de sistemas aeroespaciais. Então, também, uma salva de palmas. Então, agora eu convido o Dr. James Green, por gentileza, para vir aqui apresentar o tema para nós. Por favor. Obrigada.
So tonight we'll have an opportunity to talk about one of the team projects that the International Space University is studying. ISU has been doing summer sessions since 1988, so this is its 35th year, and it has been training some of the most fantastic scientists around the world, space engineers, and space lawyers, and people that build architectures and are designing things on the moon. So it's one of those schools that I have had the pleasure of being at many of the summer sessions. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about the project they're investigating. And it's really all about this new capability we call the metaverse. Now, as was introduced by Monica, in addition to myself, Jacob is here, and Maria is here, and Ash, our TA, is actually miles away in the metaverse. He's actually in a classroom that's orbiting the Earth in three-dimensional space. Not he's physically doing it, but he's doing it and seeing what he does. And we'll have an opportunity to use these Oculuses today for many in the audience that would like to stay to actually enter the metaverse and be in this classroom. And in that classroom, we'll look at spacecraft, we'll look at rovers, we'll talk about rockets. We can do many different things. So if everyone would like to stay afterwards and have a little taste of what it's like in virtual reality, that would be really fun, right? So once again, as I mentioned earlier, what's happened is an evolution of the internet. In 1992, we started with the World Wide Web. This, I'm sure, many of you are familiar with. You everything from Amazon to many of the places you might shop on a regular basis. You interact with that store or with the city or with maps or many different applications on the World Wide Web through web pages. Well, over many years, these things have evolved. And the second generation internet provided much more capability. A lot of money is transacted over the internet now in terms of foreign currency exchange. Much more of the world's economies are more interconnected, and it's through these kind of technologies. This revolution that's occurring now, that we call Web3, does many more things. It allows for artificial intelligence. You may have read articles about these new artificial intelligence systems that have gobbled up an enormous amount of information that you can query, and you can ask it complex questions, and it can give you much more complex answers. It has the ability to go from place to place and pull out information, put it together, and then create sentences that make sense, that are structured perfectly, that you then can read and get an indication of what new research has been done or many other different types of areas. In addition to that is the metaverse. And this is what the main thing we're going to talk about today. Well, the metaverse is something that basically rides over the internet, and it provides three-dimensional look without the feel, but letting your mind move into an auditorium or move into locations like Mars, or walk on the surface of the moon, or float in space station, and mentally be able to visualize that and actually give you the feeling of these distant locations. These are just fantastic new technologies, and they're really helped by the gaming industry. You know, many applications are developed and sold to your kids, and some of the kids in the audience may already have these type of systems where you can put on a headset and enter a game where, you know, you're being chased, or, you know, you're racing in a car, or so many other venues, some beautiful sceneries, and sometimes they're violent games, as we all know, you know, being a cowboy or fighting in an army. There's some really crazy stuff that happens, but the entertainment business has made billions of dollars in this area and developed these applications. And we believe these are important in space and how we'll use them. Will astronauts play games in space? Yeah, probably. But before they leave their capsule and go out into space and tether themselves from one part of the spaceship to the other, knowing that they have to know exactly where the hand grips are, they will practice it in the metaverse. So these are some of the exciting things that happen in this area. Now, there are several types of technologies that are being developed that are starting to merge. The metaverse uses what we call virtual reality. It creates an environment for which you then can manipulate an avatar and walk into that environment. And with your hand grips, you can move around and do many different things. Or you can even have gloves and use the gloves to move objects. These visual things allow you to get perception, depth perception, allows you to see as you look at different objects if they're built correctly. For spacecraft, in many cases, when we build a spacecraft, we have instruments that go out and view an area. You know, the spacecraft has got a camera on it, but then when we move the solar panel, we want to make sure it doesn't obscure the view. These things are done in three-dimensional environments where we can check and make sure that everything we build on the spacecraft will operate properly because we can visually see it, manipulate it, use it. So virtual reality is what the metaverse is basically doing today. Now, there's another important technology that will merge with the metaverse, and it's called augmented reality. So what's augmented reality? Well, I could put a pair of glasses on that's transparent, and I can see the audience, and then I can have somebody in my field of view that's an avatar walk down those stairs, come up here, and join me on stage. In the future, if you go to a town and you want to find the restaurant, or you want to look for very important historic buildings or areas, you will not use Google Maps. You will put a set of lenses on, and a tour guide will come up, and it will be visible to you. And that tour guide will tell you, let's walk down this street. And around the corner is Kepler's home. And the restaurant you want to go to is just another block, and take you there. And that augments your reality. That supplements what you see and what you do by having an avatar come help you. And that is an element of what augmented reality is. One of the original concepts in these avatars, one of the real early games was Pokemon Go. All right, where you were running around the city looking for a particular place, and if you put your camera at that place, you would see one of the Pokemon structures, objects. And there it is. Okay, and that is an element indeed of augmented reality. There's also what we call extended reality, where many of these objects are starting to be much more functional. Here you are. How do you change a tire? It'll tell you how to do that. It'll have the help you need there, or you can walk into a room and help design a city and many others. So not only you're looking at objects, you're looking at avatars. And so the combination of many of these technologies are currently happening, and they will be merging into the metaverse. One of the important concepts of the metaverse, it enables many different companies, many different organizations to develop what we would call a digital twin. Before you go out and build it in the metaverse. Create a twin. In this case, it's an airplane. You can look at the dynamics of it. You can run all kinds of programs that would fly this plane. Look at how the wind interacts with the plane, its lift, its speed. You can see it's how the structure undergoes major stress by indeed creating pressure dips, major wind velocities, and get a feel for it before you even what we call cut metal and put it together. What we're doing now is building cities on Mars. How we're doing that is we're first doing it as a digital twin. And we're learning what works and what doesn't work, such that when we go there, we know exactly what we want to do. So it's another really wonderful space application. And that brings us to what the team project is all about. These are new technologies, what we would call disruptive technologies, because they bring all kinds of enormous capabilities that we haven't had before in the hands of our scientists, our engineers, and all the way down to our kids, all right, that are in and out of the metaverse and playing games and growing up in this digital world, as digital twins, and becoming more and more familiar with how to use them. And so there's so many things that are going on. I'm only going to touch on a couple of them. And I've already mentioned this one, and that is, if you can imagine the International Space Station, when you see the size of it, you'll be very surprised. When you look at how big the solar panels are and all the modules that are put together, you realize it's the size of a football field. And when we bring up capsules with humans or material or experiments to the International Space Station, that means we have to bring it inside, or if there are experiments, that means we have to connect it to the outside somewhere on space station. And so an astronaut will put on a suit and go outside and then move from one end of the space station to the other by knowing where the handholds are, gripping them, coming underneath that, going in different locations. Perhaps many of you were in the event on Saturday called The Martian. How many went to The Martian? Okay, a few. The scene that really shocks me is not Mark Watney trying to grill potatoes, but Beck, one of the astronauts, moving from one end of the Hermes to the other without tethering himself because he's in such a big hurry. But if he missed a handhold and he is as far away as I am from this podium and can't reach it, he is lost. Okay? He can't make it. So what we do is we practice in virtual reality by having an entire space station constructed, both inside and outside of, to a degree, a digital twin that enables these astronauts to put on their suit, walk out, click to this one, walk over here, unclick, go to the next one, and actually be able to practice translating anywhere on the space station to add an experiment, to repair, to replace batteries, to do so many things that are so necessary to keep that operation going. And they practice that in virtual reality. So here you see on the top photo, an astronaut that's learning how to go do this job of translating and adding an instrument. And then when he's really good at it, and many women astronauts too are doing this too, as you know, then they'll stick them in a scuba environment, a tank of water, and they practice it there too. But to really understand how to do it, they do it in virtual reality. Do that first. Well, as I mentioned, we're building cities on Mars in virtual reality, creating digital twins. But NASA wants to do many more things, and NASA has come up with many different challenges for students and young adults that are interested in developing these kind of capabilities. And NASA will run a variety of contests. And they're in all kinds of different areas in terms of how we do science on Mars, to rovers, and how we maintain our rovers or cities. So many different aspects can be done in the metaverse through a digital twin than you before you actually go and do it, and you can obtain some funding for that too. Well, we hear a lot about climate change, and we would like to know what our future is based on our observations. And we're starting to move into an environment for which we're going to build a digital twin of our weather on the entire globe. And we'll have the opportunity to change it, to see what the weather is right now, what will happen tomorrow. But by adding different greenhouse gases and other things that we believe are some of the problems of our evolving world, what will weather be like in the future? So these digital twins are extremely important, and the European Space Agency has started this whole process of building digital twins to really understand some of the things that are built today and use them in three-dimensional environments. NASA has created a database or a library of these three-dimensional objects. And actually, I started that when I was head of planetary science at NASA in about 2015 or so. I asked Ames, where Jacob works, to host this capability. And at the time, it was really all about gaining these digital files that you could stick in a 3D printer and build a small spacecraft. But many of these formats are translatable into the objects that we have in the metaverse. And so this library has really exploded in terms of not only 3D printing files, but also virtual reality models in the right formats. And so many of the things that if you stick around and you can get in the metaverse that I'm going to bring in the classroom are actually already models that we use in NASA on this website. You know, artificial intelligence now has gotten so good in many different ways. Artists are using it to develop art. And we actually have an art gallery. There's an art gallery in the metaverse. If you have the right code, you can get in the right room and you can walk around this beautiful art gallery, and every piece of art that's in there was made by a computer through an artificial intelligence interface. And Alicia is one of the top metaverse artists. Her work is known throughout the world. You can get her on Facebook and on LinkedIn and many other venues. And she has some really interesting pieces that she's developed. So here is a classroom. I developed this about 1.5 years ago. This is one of the classrooms that's a virtual reality classroom in the metaverse. It's a clear bubble. Most of the time we get rid of most of the seats because we need the room to bring in models and talk to students that come in the metaverse. And it's orbiting the Earth in this case. We also can have it orbit Mars. And we can beam down from the meta ship, which is what we call this classroom, down to Mars, and we can walk on exactly what Mars looks like today. We have rovers on Mars, like Perseverance and Curiosity. Perseverance has something like 17 cameras, and I think Curiosity has something like 22 cameras. They look down, they look to one side. We do panoramas. They look behind, they look underneath the rover, they look at every dimension, and as you move, you can literally recreate the three-dimensional scene that all these cameras are looking at. And therefore you can walk the same trail that Curiosity or Perseverance has on Mars. You can look at their stratigraphy. You can look at how the dust on Mars is accumulating. And if you saw The Martian, some of those scenes are very similar to what you would really see on Mars. And so it's a really exciting way that scientists are using that to determine what samples they'll take and what experiments they'll do and study the Martian soils. And they do that because they want to know, can we grow food on Mars? The answer turns out to be yes. So yes, Mark Watney could grow potatoes. Where Curiosity is sitting, it has all the right materials. It has carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Those are just wonderful things. And actually, that's everything between my two fingers. Okay. So it has all the right stuff to have built life in the past. We know there's no life on the surface of Mars today, but it doesn't mean there wasn't life on the past. And it has all the right stuff. The soils are moist and contain nitrates, which is a great fertilizer. There's some toxins in the soils, but they're not everywhere. And where Curiosity is, the soils are alkaline. Mark Watney, grew potatoes, and those soils that he would need would be more acidic. And we believe there are also areas on Mars with a lot of acidic soils too. So Mars has the ability to sustain a settlement of humans to live and work on the planet and grow things. And once again, we're using digital twins to develop what they would do and how they would do it and how they would even grow food on Mars. So these are little snippets out of the classroom. These are some of the objects we've brought in. We can bring in planets, we can look at them, moons, we can look at them, we can spin them around and talk about various features of them. We indeed can talk about how when we launch things, how they go to Mars. What are the basic laws of travel in the solar system? Thanks to Kepler, we can show those trajectories. And then, of course, we also can go to various places. There's a number of really wonderful scenes elsewhere in the world that has a digital twin, what we call a skybox. You're immersed in an environment you can walk around in. And of course, here's the avatars. These are all avatars. These are all students that are taking these classes that are in the metaverse. Now here's a couple of our Mars scene. This one in the upper right is where Curiosity is currently sitting in where it has sat. It's actually past that, and it's rolling up that big mountain right in the middle. That's called Mount Sharp. And in fact, that dark area between where we are and the peak of the mountain, that dark area, that's a huge sand dune. Okay. It's many tens of feet in some locations. So we had to move around it and get away from it because we could not go over it, and we would trap our rover. We also can, in this case, fly through molecular clouds that we observe from Earth and can understand its structure, create a visual, a three-dimensional planetarium-like view, and then literally fly through it. And then here are other scenes on Mars. So the team that's currently working is taking this input, and although we're doing a number of things today in space using this framework, there's many more things we think we need to do. And as the technology improves, we will be able to do it. So we've asked a team of some of the top students in the world, and several of them are sitting in the crowd. And I'm really proud of this team, by the way. They're really working well together. Very serious students, making wonderful progress, and they're giving us what we believe will be a very important report by these 5 areas, telling us what the metaverse currently not only is, but indeed how it can be applied to the space industry beyond what we already know. What are the gaps? What are some of the other things that we should be doing that we're currently not doing? What is the business models? There are companies that want to know what can be built and build it and then provide it to space agencies. So there's indeed many capabilities that can be developed that we would use. What are those? And then, of course, all this has to be done with many people in the world all over the place that have the skills and abilities to do these kind of models and build these kind of environments and create these kind of applications that space agencies will want. And so what are their roles? Many emerging space groups, there's many countries now that are developing their space agency. You know, Brazil has had a wonderful space agency for more than a decade and a half that's done fantastic in terms of building spacecraft or orbiting the Earth, making all kinds of wonderful Earth observations. And it's just right down the street, right? And that's where we are. That's why we're here. That's why the International Space University is here. And that's MPIC. And it's just a fabulous organization. And then, of course, we want to know what the future is. What would the roadmap be? When would we be able to create in the metaverse things that we need, we don't have now, and we will need when we go to the moon? Humans walk around at what's called the Artemis Base Camp. Or prospecting. How do they go out in the field and find things like precious metals? The moon has all kinds of resources. The moon has what we call platinum group metals on the surface. These are platinum, palladium, whole series of metals that have been brought to them by asteroids, and we know they're there, but we have to find them and be able to extract them and use them. Our platinum group metals that we have here on Earth that we're mining in places like China and South Africa will be completely depleted in about 200 years. Some of them will be completely depleted in about 50 years. But platinum group metals are fabulous. They're in your phone. They conduct electricity really well, and they don't rust. All right? And so that makes them incredibly valuable, but they're also getting to be more and more expensive because of that. So we're really excited that this report will come out in the next couple weeks. They're working hard on it. They're writing sections of it. Some are taking breaks right now instead of writing, which I have to do, of course. And I'm delighted they're here. But these are the kind of things that we need to do to explore the computer technologies and artificial intelligence and the fantastic things that are coming out on Web3, and including the metaverse, to be able to chart a course for our future. By doing this, we will save money, enormous amount of money as we go and continue to do space exploration. But the benefits here on Earth are enormous. And let me just give you an example. How many have seen Star Trek: The Next Generation? Okay, this is with Jean-Luc Picard and his team. And when they want to take a break, what do? They walk into the holodeck, right? Well, the metaverse is going to be available to astronauts on their way to Mars. And instead of being confined in a can, when they want to break, they'll put on their three-dimensional goggles and walk into the holodeck and sit down in a forest and read. Because visually, everything will be expanded. You see that today when you walk into some homes and, wow, this looks spacious. Well, that's because they have a mirror on the wall and the room looks twice as big than it is, right? But hospitals are using the same concept. Some hospitals are investigating the metaverse and its ability to use different parts of one's mind that help heal another part of their mind. People that have depression or suicidal, where those thoughts are constantly flooding them when they put on their VR goggles, they're using and stimulating a different part of their mind that gives them excitement, hope. They forget about the problems that occur with the mental affliction of depression. And that allows the brain to take a break and start the healing process. And that, I think, will be a big benefit as it moves forward. So as the space agencies are using some of these technologies and developing them, hospitals will pick that up and be part of the metaverse. And it will be something that we'll all appreciate in many of the opportunities it provides in medicine and brain research, as an example. All right, so with that, let me ask Jacob. Maria's already here. What we have are a set of several goggles. And while we get set up, I'll be happy to answer some questions. So here's what I suggest. Maria and Jacob, grab a seat, create your boundary and come on in the metaverse. And then we'll have some people come up and we'll try it. If you'd like to try, please stick around. And we'll stick you in a classroom that's orbiting the Earth. And we'll walk around Curiosity, okay? And we'll talk about what those things look like in virtual reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much for your lecture. Amazing. So I'm not sure if I understood. So what's the idea now? So can I ask the audience about questions? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let me take some questions while Maria and Jacob grab your systems and go over and sit down. And then when you get up and running, we'll have some of the kids come up and take their place and play around in the metaverse. Okay.
How many? Okay. Aproveita. Nessas horas todo mundo vira criança, né? Todo mundo tem o direito de querer ser criança, um pouco além do convencional. Ok, go there. Ok. Alguém tem alguma pergunta? Ok.
Yeah, stand by a chair, and then we'll get set up, and then we'll sit you in a chair, and we'll put the goggles.
Obrigado.
Yeah, sure, come on.
Excuse me, Dr. Green?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Arthur.
Yes, Arthur.
I'm an aerospace engineer, and I have a question for you about this use of metaverse. I'd like to know, what do you see for the near future of the use of metaverse for business in the space sector that are already working, like for launchers, for satellites, this kind of business. How do you see the use of the metaverse for near?
Right now, we have facilities that are called concurrent design facilities, where you get a group of highly trained experts and you bring them into a room and they design a spacecraft. Okay. And they do it on paper and they do it in a CAD model and they play around with the mass and all kinds of stuff. We can do that virtually. And the engineers don't have to be in the same room. They can just walk in the room wherever they are in the world. And so that's a major advantage because you can bring in the experts to do that. We're nearly there. We have some examples where we're starting to have engines and instruments and solar panels, and we can put together the system, but it's not completely integrated and it doesn't do everything that we want it to do. Okay?
I see. Thank you.
You bet. Another question? So Maria's getting in the system now. Why don't you go over there? Yeah. And I'll be right over. Now there's a question. Yes.
Hi, Jen. I know you know me. It's
Yes,
Kleber. I'm from INPE, for people who don't know me. And I have a question for you. Do you know the movie, The Player Number One?
Yes.
Do you think that will be our future?
Well, that's a game. And it blends real life with virtual gaming. Gaming's not there yet, but that is where they're moving. You know, what you saw is indeed the hero of the story is someplace in his bedroom, and he's in the metaverse. He's racing a car, and trying to outmaneuver obstacles, and indeed that's coming along really well in the gaming industry. It's just absolutely exploding.
Yep, but the movie has also a discussion about the social behavior of people because they are much more on the virtual reality than the real, the actual
Sure.
reality.
Sure, you have to have drama, and drama means there's conflict with people. You know, what I liked about The Martian is, it's the drama is humans versus nature, you know, and it's not like so many of the science fiction movies where you end up with more, the astronauts are fighting each other. There's conflict between them. Well, there's really no conflict between them because they're all a team trying to be able to go do an activity and be able to create a new knowledge from going to Mars and survive. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Al.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other question?
Okay. If not, I'm going to jump in and start manipulating some objects, and then we'll have many of our students do that. Thank you so much. You in the room now? Yeah, yeah. Great. Looking around.